diagnosed with Asperger's at the age of 20 and started writing about his experiences dealing with that condition, and finally wrote the book Finding Kansas. So Aaron was here last year for 3 programs, so we decided to bring him back again for a very important program. So welcome, Aaron.
Thank you. Well, yes, my name is Aaron Likens. I serve as the Autism Ambassador at Easter Seal, Southern California. Also author of the book Finding Kansas, which, as mentioned, I was able to write from a first-hand account. I do have a diagnosis, but myself, I got diagnosed later in life, age 20. But just because I got diagnosed later in life, all the signs were there ahead of time, but nobody knew what to make of me. And at every parent-teacher conference, my parents heard the same thing. You know, your son Aaron, he doesn't associate or socialize too well with the other kids, but you know, don't worry about it. Maybe he's smarter. My parents had selective hearing. They only heard the second half of that sentence, I might be smarter, so they took that as a sign that they were the best parents in the world. Specifically my dad, and I think he still has those words bouncing around in his head to this day, but what did my teachers mean by I didn't associate or socialize too well? Started in kindergarten, and I have to say I loved kindergarten. Because in kindergarten, we got to play with these very fun, thin-sided blocks. There was a 6-sided honeycomb thing, orange square, green triangle, blue diamond, and putting those together, sensory-wise, I don't want to say my life peaked in kindergarten, but I have not found anything as fun as those blocks. Those blocks were, you have no idea. But anyway, in kindergarten, my classmates, they tried to join in the fun, but here's the problem. They sort of did it wrong. Maybe they used a little bit too much yellow over here, maybe a little bit too much orange over there, but they were doing it wrong. So I would go over and tell them. Actually, no. I'd go over and destroy what they were doing, and I'd say, no, you're doing it wrong. Destroy it, because in my mind, there's the right way, and in everybody else's mind is the wrong way. But that's a conversation for another day, because I still may think that from time to time, or all the time. But after a couple weeks, none of my classmates joined in the fun, and I was okay with that because they didn't know what they were doing. In kindergarten, though, I did make the attempt to socialize with my classmates. I didn't go about it in the most traditional of ways, but I tried. I grew up in Indianapolis where, in the springtime, severe weather, a constant threat. And here's the thing about weather. 1, I did find it really interesting. 2, I was absolutely deathly afraid of it, and I was sure every single day a tornado was going to come and wipe Indianapolis clean off the map. I was sure of it. So picture this, I'm in kindergarten having a conversation with my classmate, you know, about very simple topics, such as the National Weather Service and a threat of a tornado watch because of the jet stream that's intermingling with the low pressure system that's being influenced by a cold front that's going to bring up some of the Gulf moisture. Yeah, my classmates naturally would just slowly back away from me, and I might as well have been speaking French, which I don't speak. But had I been speaking it, I think my classmates would have understood me a whole lot more than this weather technical jargon I was saying. But here is the problem. Being on the autism spectrum, so often, we're not good at judges at reading facial expressions. We're not going to know if you're happy, sad, mad, or if we are absolutely boring you to tears. So, as my classmates backed away from me, well, I just kept up with them in perfect stride, giving them more weather information than they could ever possibly use, and love every single minute of it. Took most of the school year, but eventually I realized nobody my own age was listening to a single word I had to say. So I gravitated towards talking to adults, either because they knew what I was talking about, or they were very good at pretending not knowing what I was talking about. But in first grade, I loved recess. Most first graders do love recess. It's a grand time, you know, run around, be obnoxious, expel energy. Myself, oh no, that wasn't recess at all. Recess for me was known as a 30-minute conversation with a teacher. It was great because in the morning I would draw a weather map and I would deliver the weather forecast, and on Mondays, Mondays were awesome because they were home with a 5-day forecast. So I really brought it home on a Monday, and while growing up in Indianapolis, auto racing is a sport of choice. So on Mondays and Tuesdays, I give a race recap of the previous weekend's races. Thursdays and Fridays would be race previews. And again, I gotta say, I love those recesses. My first grade teacher, on the other hand, with about a month to go in the school year, she had had enough. She looked at me and she said, Aaron, if you don't go play with the other kids right now, you're never going to recess again. Probably not the best thing to tell a first grader, but knowing what I know now, I can't believe it took her that long to finally issue that threat, because I talked nonstop 30 minutes every single day, and oh, those were good days. Well, second grade came around, new problem popped up. This problem, I learned the patterns of the school's fire drills. That may not sound like that big of a deal, but a high percentage of us on the autism spectrum are going to have a sensory issue in one form or another. That number is 80%. 80% of those on the autism spectrum will have a sensory issue. For others, it might be certain types of fabrics, other certain types of lights, but for me, it is sounds. And when I say sensory issue to sound, people often mistake that I'm just talking about sounds that are too loud, as if you turn a car radio all the way up. Not the case. For me, a sensory issue is felt one in three different ways. One, oddly enough, for a fire alarm, it sort of makes me feel like I have fire flowing through my veins. Two, if you've ever been driving and had a close call, whether you pulled out in front of somebody or somebody pulled out in front of you, you screeching brakes, almost an impact, your heart rate goes through the roof, you get that flood of adrenaline. Or example three, feels just like two, you're driving down the highway, you come over a crest of a hill, and there's a police officer on the side of the road with the radar pointed in your general direction. Even if you're doing the speed limit, you're going to tense up, you're going to get that momentary burst of adrenaline. And in examples 2 and 3, take that moment of your peak heart rate, your peak adrenaline, amplify it and sustain it. That's the best way I can attempt to describe what a sensory issue feels like, and it's not pleasant. Well, back in second grade, each fire drill, I look around the room, nobody else was fidgeting, nobody else like they were in any pain whatsoever, so I could only draw one of two conclusions. Either everybody else is really strong, or I was really weak. And in second grade, or any grade for that matter, nobody wants to be labeled the weak one, the wimp, so I didn't speak up about it. Well, further compounding the problem was that I learned the patterns. If we were going to have a fire drill, it was always on a Thursday. And I think they're supposed to be random, but they did not randomize it. If we were going to have a fire drill, always on a Thursday, so I quickly learned not to be in school on a Thursday. It is known that we on the autism spectrum, we may resort to a behavior or activity to get out of an activity or task. So I came up with this idea, and in my mind it was a great idea. Hey, if I misbehave enough, I don't go to school on Thursday. But that tactic would not have worked in my household, considering my dad's a pastor, so I had to come up with something better. And this was a great idea. Every Thursday, I mysteriously became sick. Eventually, I was nominated for Best Actor in the categories of Best Headache, Throat Ache, Stomachache that didn't exist. I put on some award-winning performances on those Thursday mornings, but eventually my dad learned, so I had to upgrade my tactics. I went to stage 2. Thermometer, coffee, works great to have a fever in the morning. Until you press your luck and you show your dad a fever of 107.7, and at that point in time you lose all credibility. The trick never works again, and even when you are sick, you go to school. So that backfired for me. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, more problems popped up. The ever-changing social dynamic confused me to no end. Secondly, sensory issues. Now, I'm already guilty of this, but if you read any literature or hear another speaker like myself talk about autism, sensory issues will usually come up, and it will always be something to the superlative. Fire alarms, that's really loud, or fireworks, backfiring car, pots and pans clattering out of a cabinet, a laser light show. It's always something to the extreme. You don't need extreme to have sensory issues. What I mean by that, a lot of us are hypersensitive to our surroundings. We're going to hear everything. Think about a classroom setting, 20, 25, 30 kids, that's a lot of noise, whether it's just somebody tapping their pencil on the table, 2 students over there having a conversation, 2 over there, somebody up front talking to the teacher, and myself, I could hear what was going on in that classroom, which sometimes is an advantage, sometimes a disadvantage, depending on what lesson I was hearing. But halfway through 6th grade somebody asked if I would come up with the 5 most important statements about autism, and I made this list. And coming in at number 5, and this explains this phenomenon perfectly, living life on the autism spectrum is like living life unfiltered. If you want 2 words to describe autism, you'd be hard-pressed to come up with a better 2-word phrase. But having this life unfiltered thing in play, I was absolutely and I've heard this from so many other teachers and individuals on the spectrum, first 2 hours of school went by fine. You get to about that 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock hour, I had absolutely nothing left. I was mentally fatigued, I had horrible headaches, and halfway through that 6th grade year, I missed 75% of that first semester, so we went to homeschooling. That worked great, but a year later, I decided I wanted to go back to school because in my mind, it can't be as bad as I remembered. So I went back and it worked great for 3 days. Then the same patterns of behavior popped up again and, well, had to go back to homeschooling. Flash forward 5 years after that. It was a snowy November Saturday in St. Louis, and my dad was reading an article in Parade magazine, which was really odd. He never read Parade magazine. He never read the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, but in that article on that weekend was a thing about this thing called Asperger's. Before that moment in time, I had every diagnosis under the sun. If it had 3 or 4 letters in it, odds are I had the diagnosis at some point in time, and some of those diagnoses did fit 50, 60% of the puzzle, but there wasn't a complete fit until my dad read this thing and things seemed to make sense. Well, my dad took me to my doctor, and this was December 2003, autism awareness back then, nowhere where we are today. And my doctor, he had never heard of autism or Asperger, so he got the yellow pages out, found autism in the yellow pages, sent me to go get an assessment, got the assessment. A couple weeks later, went back to my doctor, and this doctor, not the best doctor in the world, he was reading the assessment in front of me going, reading this here, yep, ooh, yep, well, there's no doubt about it, you have Asperger's. Good luck? Good luck. Yes, that tells me a lot. If you're like me and you're given a diagnosis and you've never heard of it, there's only one place to turn to. That's known as the world's most trusted place for information, also known as the internet, because everything on the internet's true, all right? Very first website I came across, December 2003, made a bold proclamation. It stated that individuals with Asperger's will never have a job, will never have friends, will never be happy. Horrible introduction. And unfortunately for myself, I believed those words. And in life, autism or not, in life, if you believe no's, don'ts, and can'ts, that's exactly what's going to happen. And that's what happened to me. I pushed everybody in my life away. I didn't care about any person, any place, anything. And if I could have disappeared, if I could have vanished, I would have been okay with that. Then, 15 months later, at the brink of inner self-destruction, I sat down at my computer and I started to write. And that's relevant because before that point in time, writing was the most awful, painful thing in the world. Getting me to write anything in school back then, good luck with that. My number one answer on essay questions was because. Not because anything. No, that was the entire answer. I was always expecting good grades, but my teachers always disagree with me for some reason. But not only was I writing, but I was finally, for the first time in my life, expressing myself on the emotional level. Before that point in time, I was the least emotional person in the world. If you ask me anything remotely close to the realm of emotions or anything subjective, you got 3 and only 3 words. I don't know. I was a broken record, I don't know, but I started writing, and I'm an author by accident. I had no intentions of writing a book when I sat down to start writing, which means I'm a public speaker by accident. If you would have told me I'd now be giving my 1,020th career presentation, I would have laughed at you if you would have told me that 10 years ago. I would have said, there's no way, because I'm actually one of the shyest, quietest, most reserved individuals you will ever meet. I know, you're not believing me right now. Just trust me on that one. But no, I never intended on any of this. My whole reason for writing was very simple. I just wanted to tell my parents who I was and why I was, because I couldn't speak it. So I found my voice through writing and eventually got the book of Finding Kansas. And I do have to begin with why my book has such an obscure title. So first and foremost, my book is not a geography lesson. There, I have found Kansas before, unfortunately. That photo pretty much sums up the entire state for my interactions, although I have to say a parent in Missouri saw this about 3 years ago and said that that photo was false advertising Kansas. He lived in western Kansas, and he said that photo has more trees in that photo than the entire western half of Kansas. So his words, not mine, but reinforces that not much is going on there. Furthermore, my book has nothing to do with the Wizard of Oz. If people try to guess what my book is referencing, that's about the only thing that comes to mind, which reinforces the fact that Kansas isn't famous for all that much. Follow-up question, are you from Kansas? I'm not, although I was born in the southern half of Nebraska, so I am from the same boring neighborhood. Thirdly, my book isn't a treasure hunt, so what it is about, obviously, it's about my life with Asperger's. So, since I'm not talking about the physical, literal state of Kansas, What am I talking about? Well, envision it this way. What if you're paralyzed in every state from the neck down, except when you cross into the borders of Kansas, everything becomes just a little bit more normal. Now, I've changed the wording. When I began as a presenter, I believed normal existed. It took me about 35 years to realize there is no such thing as normal. And if we do come across that one person, there's probably one. If we do come across that one person on this planet that's normal, congratulations, we have found the most boring individual on the planet. So that's my definition of normal. But I think the term wanting to become more normal, very appropriate. And when I'm within Kansas, things become more normal, which equate to this. If you ask me a question, I'm going to have the answer relatively instantly. I'm not going to have to think about it. I'm not going to have to process it. Things are just going to be more normal. Now, let's say I venture off to another state, such as North Dakota, which I've been picking on for a long time, because in 1,020 presentations, less than a handful of people have ever claimed to have been from that state. I didn't check their driver's license, though, so I can't validate their claims. You never hear any news from North Dakota, and you will never see any license plates from North Dakota. So I'm under the impression North Dakota is just a myth. It doesn't actually exist. It's a government conspiracy of somebody that liked nice round numbers. We were just hung up on 49, so somebody just put North Dakota on the map. Someday I'm probably going to give a presentation there. I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to do with this presentation. They're going to run me out of their state. I know it. But anyway, North Dakota stays the opposite of Kansas in this presentation. So when I go to North Dakota, I get stuck processing. And processing for us on the autism spectrum can take longer. And that's unfortunate because we live in a society where everything is now, now, now. So when you ask a question, I know you're waiting for an answer, so I have to think about it, I have to process it, and processing for us on the autism spectrum just takes longer. And I know you're waiting for an answer. I know it, so eventually I give you an answer of, I don't know. I know the answer. You may very well know the answer, but at that moment in time, under the gun of the question, I am not going to be able to get my answer out. I'm just going to be stuck playing the processing game. So between those two examples of having answers relatively effortlessly or over processing, where would you choose to live? Hopefully your answer would be Kansas, although I do have to say, if you have or if you are ever planning on driving across the real state of Kansas, I have to apologize right now because that's 8 hours of your life you quite honestly can never get back. I know so. I've done the drive 8 times. So that state owes me many, many hours. And not only that, Kansas City to Lawrence, it's a Kansas turnpike. You get the distinct honor and privilege of paying them $3. Well, last year the price went up. It's now $3.25. You don't get any more bang for the buck. It is as boring as ever, and no. So what is Kansas besides the most boring drive in the universe? Kansas is the activity or interest that a person on the autism spectrum is obsessed with, and as my dad would proudly state, won't shut up about. Now, I don't know if that's the most professional of terms, but since my dad wrote my PowerPoint and he's had to put up with me for 37 years, I'm going to let him have that statement because it is true. Whatever Kansas is, we can talk about it nonstop for 2 hours and not take a breath and have absolutely no idea that you're not listening, but trust me when I say I'm going to have the time of my life. Whew. That's a mouthful. Really hard to get out in one breath. But when we start talking about our Kansas, we may start talking at the accelerated rate. We may go on and on and on. You may give us every social sign in the world that you don't care, but yeah, good luck with that. Once Kansas mode is initiated, it's going to be a deluge of information. There is a very beautiful thing about this concept of Kansas, though, and this, in my opinion, is the number one most important statement about autism. I did not coin this term. I did the other four that you'll hear, but not this one. But it is the most important statement about autism, and that is if you've met one person with autism, you've only met one person with autism. Next, one person's Kansas very well could be the next person's North Dakota. For me, sensory-wise, as bad as fire alarms were, there is nothing worse in this world than the sound of live drums. Truly, worst pain I have ever felt. Yet, travel south of my home in St. Louis, go 45 miles, go to Perryville. There's a mother there. She has 3 daughters. They all have Asperger's, which that's a statistical anomaly, but they all have Asperger's, and they're also my professional drummers. So my least favorite thing in the world, the thing 1,000 times worse than the fire alarm, is their absolute favorite thing in the world. So this right here makes the autism spectrum so difficult for general society to understand because so often people want everything to fit into a nice tidy box, and the autism spectrum is not that nice tidy box. There does seem to be a Kansas cluster though. If we were playing a game show very much like the Family Feud and we had the top 7 answers on the board of what other kids or adults Kansas could be, top 7 things I've seen: dinosaurs, Legos, trains, movies, weather, anything that has to do with the military or airplanes, or anything that has to do with computers, electronics, games, video games, specifically the video game Minecraft, which actually right now I'd put Minecraft at number 1 by at least 3.5 parsecs. There is nothing close to it, but those are just the top 7. Kansas could be anything. It truly could. It could be something broad in nature, such as marine biology, asteroids, comets, world economics, European history. Or Kansas could be something really narrow in its range of knowledge, such as the history of Kalamazoo, Michigan, or famous mayors from the state of Idaho. Who knew? Kansas could be something broad or narrow, but whatever it is, I can almost guarantee you that is where we are going to feel normal. Oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes, Kansas is going to be something heavy in facts. If we are talking about facts, we are talking about something that is right or wrong, black or white. There is no middle ground. There is no gray area. And it's within the gray area of life that processing takes place. Therefore, if I know everything in advance, I'm not going to be taking that trip to North Dakota. I'm not going to be stuck playing the processing game. And because of that, Kansas is everything. And we may do everything we can to impose our Kansas on you to get the conversation to something we know. But one thing I often get asked, what is the power of Kansas? Great example. I said I hated to write in school, but there was one major exception. 7th grade, free writing piece. Now I struggled with these assignments typically. These assignments were wide open. This assignment was as wide open as it gets. It was write about your favorite topic. No other directions, no other directives, no use this many metaphors and this many, no, there is nothing. Well, the due date was 1 month, so I figured it had to be really long. So I spent that month, and 1 month later, I turned in a 78-page, single-space, complete history of motorsport. I got an A+ on it. The teacher never read it. Well, she tried. She got a page and a half in, and then she realized it was a lost cause, which meant she didn't even get out of the 1890s, but anyway, every future writing assignment thereafter had a 2-page double-space cap to it, so she learned her lesson on that one. But yeah, Kansas for me is most certainly out of race, and if you want 8 hours of conversation that just goes nowhere, get me started on that. I'm going to enjoy it. You're going to be like my kindergarten classmate trying to get away from me because it's just going to be, it's going to be so much fun. Anyway, let's continue on. One of the first concepts I wrote in my book was film theory or firsts. And for this concept, imagine the mind on the autism spectrum having a camera that uses real film. I do say real film because if you ever get the chance to speak at a middle school, do not mention a camera that uses film. The kids will have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, and they then won't hear another word you have to say. So I've learned that lesson, but film will stay alive in this presentation. So imagine the mind on the autism spectrum having a camera that uses film. And anytime there is a new event, a new situation, a new person, a new anything, imagine the mind taking a snapshot, printing the film, and putting it in a portfolio. Now, anytime that situation or what have you is duplicated, we on the autism spectrum, we already know it's going to happen because what this concept states is that the Asperger mind, or mind on the autism spectrum, is controlled by firsts, and everything must always be like it was the first time. So the fourth most important statement about autism is whatever happens first always has to happen. A couple examples to back that up. When I was 12, the AMA Supercross Series came to St. Louis for the first time. That's the stadium motorcycle race over all the dirt jumps and whatnot. And over the course of the evening, I got hungry. So my dad took me to the concession stand where somehow hot dogs were $8 and soda $7. My dad laughed and said, no. What he did say, though, is that we would eat at a diner on the way home. And we did. 1 year later, I go to the same race. Now, I know what's going to happen. I know I'm going to get hungry. I know I'm going to ask for food. I know he's going to see the prices and say no. And after he says no, he's going to say, we're going to eat at that diner on the way home. Everything happened to the letter except he didn't say we would eat at that diner. However, I knew we were, and the trap I fell into that night, and this is now the third most important statement about autism, and for educators, probably the most frustrating, and that is that we on the autism spectrum spectrum can operate under the code of I think, therefore you should know. If I think it, if I know it, if I expect it, if I remember it, you do too. So if I know we're going to stop at the diner, I don't need to let you know it, because since I know it, you know it. On the way home, we got near the diner, and I didn't hear my dad's turn signal come on, and that's important because I'm an absolute rule stickler. I will let you know every traffic law you break. I am a horrible passenger. It was probably really cute when I was 8. I still do it. I worked for 2 different national racing series, and we had a race in Austin, Texas last April, and our PR lady picked me up at the airport, and she was having a bad day. In the first 5 minutes, there was like 4 infractions, improper lane change, driving in 2 lanes. It was just, my voice was getting tired, and after about the 5th, you're doing it wrong, she said, Aaron, I have left my kids on the road for less things than what you have done. Ooh, okay. Well, we get to the hotel, and we're driving to the lobby, and this hotel had a really weird curb that jutted out. We're headed right to it, and I don't open my mouth because she told me not to talk, and we crashed right into it, destroy the right front wheel. The first thing she does is, Aaron, where were you on that one? I said, you told me not to talk. Aspies, we can't win. We can't. Anyway, going back to the story when I was now 13, going home from the motorcycle race, there went the diner, no turn signal, no turn, and I turned to my dad. I was so confused. I didn't know why we weren't stopping, and I went, diner, 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 diner. Well, we turned around, ate at that diner every year since, up until April 9th, 2011. I was in Joplin, Missouri that evening giving a presentation, so a 16-year streak came to an end. Only thing I'll tell you about that night is be thankful you weren't there for that presentation. I talked about this for 35 minutes. I needed tissues. It was a train wreck. So be very grateful almost 9 years have moved on. Be very grateful. Well, another story also has to do with the realm of food. This concept has more to do than just food, but my 2 stories, I must have been hungry when I started as a presenter because first 2 stories are in the food realm. But when I was 5, the elders of my dad's church treated the family to lunch at the Olive Garden. Now that concerned my dad because I was the pickiest eater in the world. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I still am one of the pickiest eaters in the world, and I have a rule that food is never ever upon any circumstances allowed to touch on a plate. All food needs to stay nice in its own little area. Separate plates work great too, but if you could see my dad and aunt's plate at Thanksgiving, it's not a plate of food. It is a haphazard pile of chaos. It is every single food of Thanksgiving piled into one big blob, and it is wrong on so many levels. And it does have levels because it's stacked. It's horrible. And every Thanksgiving, my aunt goes, Aaron, sweetie, Aaron, look, the food section, look, I love you, look. Fittingly enough, as you enter her house, she got a doormat. She got it just for me, and it proudly proclaims, you're not in Kansas anymore. So, oh, it does help. Where'd it go? There it is. Forgot, yeah. Probably needs new batteries. But anyway, there it is. Maybe already clicked and already saw it, which totally ruined the timing of it. But she just moved to St. Louis from Washington, D.C. The first thing she unpacked, the very first thing she unpacked after a 1,000-mile move was that. So maybe that's why I've been out of town for about 700 of the past 800 days. No, I've just been really busy, but sounds better. Anyway, so I'm 5. We're at the Olive Garden, and at that point in time in my life, I only ate 3 foods. I either ate macaroni and cheese, hot dogs, or pizza on a good day. Still really wasn't buddy with pizza yet, but now, most certainly. But those are my 3 foods, 2.5 foods. We're at the Olive Garden. I want a hot dog, but they're an Italian chain, as my dad informed me by saying, Aaron, it's not in their business model. What? Come on, I was 5. I didn't know what that meant. Bottom line, I wasn't getting a hot dog. So my dad ordered the manicotti, figuring that would be the thing closest to macaroni and cheese, but you see, when it came out, macaroni and cheese doesn't have that weird red sauce on it, so I went on a hunger protest, but because the elders were paying for lunch and not my parents, they weren't going to order something else. So I was either getting the manicotti or I wasn't eating lunch, and I quickly got wind of that, so I tried the manicotti, and I liked it. I liked it a lot. I liked it so much that every time thereafter when we went to the Olive Garden, in my mind it wasn't the Olive Garden, it was Manicottiville. because in my mind, that's the only thing they served. When I was 12, I finally tried the breadsticks. When I was 18, I finally tried the salads. I used to joke that trying something new was like a tetanus shot. You only need a booster once every so often, last February, I tried something new. I tried something new by accident. I was in California. I got In-N-Out, and usually I'm ketchup, mustard, pickles. That's it. But I forgot to specify that, so I got a whole bunch of weird stuff on my burger, and oh my goodness, it was burger heaven. Who knew the onion could make the burger? But, no, sorry. But anyway, I tried something new last February, so using my old system, I don't need to try anything new till February 2029. Awesome sensation. But I got asked a very unfortunate question in June of 2010. A parent at a presentation asked me, okay, Aaron, you get the same thing every time. What would you do if they said they were at a manicotti? Well, I laughed it off because one, I don't do hypothetical that well, but two, they've had it forever. 3 days later, I go to the Olive Garden. I order my manicotti and cherry Coke. Waitress leaves. Waitress comes back, places the cherry Coke on the table, and she said, sir, as of last week, we no longer carry manicotti. You what? No, I had no idea what to do. I had no idea what to do. I had no idea what to say. And the reason why whatever happens first always has to happen, the reason why it is so important is this. If I know it's going to happen in the order that it's going to happen, if I know everything I have to say and every way you are going to react, we're taking the processing element of life and throwing it out the window. It doesn't matter. It doesn't exist. And when things go slightly askew, well, here's what happens. I kind of creep that waitress out because I stared at her like this for a good 40 seconds. But I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. It took me 40 seconds of processing to realize I had to ask for the menu. Menu? What's that? I hadn't used the menu in I don't know how long, so I got the menu. I didn't know what to do with it, and oh my goodness, there were so many different things to order. What is the right answer? Eventually, I ordered something else, hated it, and I used to say I haven't been back since, but I was running an Olive Garden boycott till they would bring it back, and they brought it back in the fourth quarter on a seasonal menu, and my boycott didn't stipulate bring it back forever, so I happened back, the boycott's over. Their lasagna is actually not bad, but they should just bring back the manicotti and the world would be a much happier place, at least in my world. Well, we go from one sad story to another sad story because this needs to quit double clicking or I'm going to have no idea where I am in my presentation. But this is a soda can. It represents a potential associative memory system. Now, every person on the autism spectrum is going to share this, but is mentioned, at least in the DSM, that people on the autism spectrum may exhibit an inappropriate attachment to objects. I have to admit, I sort of take offense to that term, inappropriate, because to me, it makes perfect sense. And what I mean by that, I have a videographic memory. It's like having a DVD library of everything that's ever happened, except when it comes to people. When it comes to people, it's very hard for me to remember them. Out of sight, out of mind. I can remember places, fine. People, not so much. Because of that, I have to remember people through other means, be it days of the year, certain numbers, certain words, certain foods, certain smells. But the number one way I remember a person is through physical items. And when I was 12, I had a friend stay at my house all night. Now, this was a rare occurrence. I didn't have many friends growing up, and I most certainly didn't have many friends staying over. So this was a big deal. And over the course of the evening, he'd drink a Minute Maid orange soda, and when he was done, he placed it on my dresser. Very quickly, that soda can became more than a soda can to me. It became my connection to my friend. I knew I had a friend through that soda can. So that soda can stayed there a while. A couple days, a couple weeks, and a couple months, and 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 3 years. 5 years later, I went to a race car driving school in Las Vegas for a week, and while I was out there, my mom thought she would do me this really big favor and clean my room. First thing I noticed when I got home wasn't that I could see the floor for the first time in half a decade. No, first thing I noticed was that soda can, which meant so much to me, gone. Tossed out like a piece of trash. And in my mom's defense, that's exactly what it was. How could she have known that can meant anything? Odds are, before that day, if she would have asked me, I would have said, I don't know. It's there, I don't know. That's probably what I would have said. End result, when I saw that can gone, was I cried more over the loss of my 2 cats and dog, and they all lived to be over the age of 16 and were my only friends for many years, but they weren't a person. That soda can was my connection to a person, and poof, gone, deleted from history. Not every person on the spectrum is going to share this characteristic. That's very important to know, but next person you come across, it may be much more pronounced than what I have just described. Next person may not be in play whatsoever, but what may be an inanimate object to you may mean the absolute world to us. And if you're unaware of that and we see that item moved, you can get a lot of emotion really quickly because it could remind them of a house they used to live in, a friend they didn't know, and if they see it moved, or in my mom's unfortunate instance, tossed out, it was devastating for me, but thankfully I was able to write a chapter about it. While I was writing, I was struggling, absolutely struggling on ways to describe social anxiety. It isn't so much to just put down on paper. Yeah, when I go out in public, I feel ill at ease. Okay, how could I describe that better that anybody could relate to? And when I discovered the theatrical term fourth wall, I went, oh, this is perfect. And when I'm not in an auditorium like this, sometimes I need a picture of a stage. But when I'm actually on a stage, the concept works a lot better. But if I were in a production right now, and I were an internationally renowned, awesomely good actor, I'd be dealing with 4 walls. The 2 side walls, the third wall is a backdrop, and if I were really good, I could envision there is a 4th wall separating me, the actor, from you, the audience. I'm playing my part in my little world. You do not exist. Now, there is another term out there called breaking the 4th wall, which I did right there with that little 90-degree turn, acknowledging that you're there. I just broke the 4th wall. Not too many plays do it, but to give you some other maybe more popular examples of breaking the 4th wall, if you saw the television series The Office, that show broke the 4th wall every episode. Eye contact to the camera, acknowledging that you're watching. Movie example, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, plenty to break each of the 4th wall in that movie. But as I said, not too many plays break the 4th wall, but let's say you're here, there's a play, you're in the front row, and this play, it is safe to say, it is your Kansas. You've been to this play 63 times. You're in the front row, the main actor's on stage giving the big, heavy, powerful monologue, and let's say mid-monologue, out of nowhere, he looks down at you, makes direct eye contact, and goes, yeah, excuse me, what do you think I should do next? Even though you have the script memorized, at that moment in time, I can almost guarantee you that you are on the express train to North Dakota. You're going to be over-processing. You're going to have no idea what's going on or why it's going on. And by the time you get to the conclusion that the actor's being fired after that night, you really still don't know if you should respond or not. So you don't respond. And yeah, you come to the conclusion that actor's going to be fired. Well, sure, you could go up there, you could play every part, every role, but you're going to be stuck playing the processing game. That, for me, is what going out in public is like. I get stuck playing the processing game. And if you ever want to watch me squirm, start a conversation by saying, hey, Aaron, how are you? I struggle with that. I struggle with common greetings because, okay, what is the criteria of how am I? Are we talking the past day, the past week, the past month? Because if we're talking just what's happened in the past month and a half, oh, I've got some really weird stuff that's happened. 10 days ago, I was taken out by a race car at Daytona. Actually happened last month, threw my back out at a different race. So I'm 0 for 2 on safe races this year. But and go back further last year, lots of weird stuff happened in the 4th quarter. Oh, wait, am I still talking? Oh, sorry. You ask me how I'm doing, and if I am in a talkative mood, it's going to be like being back in kindergarten. I'm going to give you more information than you ever cared to know. But here's the thing. You ask the question, I'm giving you the answer. Now, I know the script. I know the script of how are you. Person A says hello, how are you? Person B says I'm well, how are you? Person A says fine, that's it. But when you take questions on a literal level, it is very hard to be able to use that script and transition it to understand it. And the number one thing, though, that breaks the 4th wall is eye contact. A high percentage of us on the autism spectrum struggle with it. Maybe we completely avoid it. That doesn't mean everybody. Some individuals make inappropriate amounts of eye contact as if they're in the midst of a stare-down championship tournament. That's rare. Can happen. I've heard some misguided experts say that if a person makes eye contact, that disqualifies them from an autism diagnosis. No, it doesn't. But some of us may make inappropriate. But for the most part, we're going to shy away from it. For me, here's why. At a young age, I learned quickly that random eye contact initiates a random conversation, and since random conversations are hard, so too conversations. So if you ever see me outside the realm of a presentation, you're not going to recognize me because I am always looking down. Because if I'm looking down, how could I possibly make eye contact with you? And if you're standing right there and you say, hello, how are you, and I just keep walking, I'm not exactly being rude because you're not going to know if I saw you or not. Here's the secret. Yeah, I did see you. Yeah, I did hear you. But at that moment in time, you're not going to know it. Once a conversation is in play, eye contact remains difficult for me. Here's why. I started by saying I'm not a good judge with facial expressions. I'm not going to know if you're happy, sad, mad, or if I'm boring you to tears. So, this doesn't mean I'm not, double negative. I'm still receiving the signals. I'm registering. Okay, that was a head nod. That was a head tilt. That was a laugh. Wait, was that a real laugh like a ha ha ha? Or is that a fake laugh like a huh? I'm going to be receiving all this information. In my brain, I'm not going to be able to come to any conclusion on what it means. I'm going to be stuck getting information overload, and eventually I'm not going to hear a single word you have to say. I'm going to be so busy analyzing the physical picture, I'm not going to hear what you have to say. So in a conversation, I can do one of two things. I can either look at you and not hear a word you have to say, or look past you, around you. I often look in the corner, and by doing that, I'm minimizing the amount of sensory input, and I'm able to hear what you have to say. Don't get me wrong, eye contact is something that should be encouraged, absolutely. But there are certain situations, if there's more gravity to the situation, my eye contact's going down. So eye contact should be something that should be encouraged, but in certain situations, demanding it might not necessarily be the best course of action. I gotta say, I love games. Games are amazing, games are awesome, and the number one reason why games are amazing are rules. Rules are awesome, rules are great, and when I was 5, there was only one thing I wanted for Christmas, and that was Monopoly, which might have been another early sign I was on the autism spectrum. Most 5-year-olds aren't clamoring for Monopoly, nor dreaming of the day of working a 3-way trade to offload Connecticut Avenue to pick up North Carolina Avenue to finally get that elusive Indiana Avenue. That was me, though, and I did get it that Christmas of '88. And the whole family played the next night. I beat everybody, including my dad. He never played Monopoly since. True story, he has been Monopoly free since '88. Somehow, I am the only one in my family that loves games. I have no idea how that happened, but I do have to give a slight public service announcement right now, because there are some of you out there that play Monopoly with house rules. Maybe a free parking jackpot, maybe double the salary for landing on Go. And if you are one of those types, I don't know how to put this calmly or kindly. Shame on you. The rules are printed. They're called the official rules of Monopoly. They come free in every box. Please read them. Adhere by them. Thank you. Now, there is a reason why I give this public service announcement, and it is this. If every person in the entire world plays Monopoly with the official rules, no matter where you go on this planet, the rules are going to be the same. Now, granted, we probably can't pronounce all the properties that in all the world. There are some languages that I wouldn't even know how to pronounce one letter of, but here's the thing. We could still play the game. We might have to, if you have the rules memorized like I do, you don't need to be able to read the actual property in point. The pictures on the Transit Community chess cards will be the same, so if you know the pictures, you know what the outcome is. So you can be 6,000 miles away from home playing the same game. And yet when it comes to social rules, I'm still trying to find that one size fits all, everybody plays by this set. Because so often in life, 1 minute the rules are this, next minute they're that, next minute they go back to this, and then 10 minutes later they go to something they've never been before. And we on the autism spectrum are left wondering what just happened. To further that, to keep the game concept alive, think of it this way. You just rolled a 9 and you landed directly on Boardwalk, which you can't roll a 9 and land directly on Boardwalk without the help of a chance card. But while you're processing the logic for that, I'm just going to keep things more confusing, because currently on Boardwalk there are 22 hotels and 19 houses. That's way against the rules. Not only that, there's a king on community chess being checked by the knight that just landed on Boardwalk. And oh, by the way, you land on a triple word space, so I hope you have some good letters to play off the word frog, which is currently on luxury tax. Huh? What is going on in that example? Is it Monopoly, is it Scrabble, or is it chess? What is going on? For us on the autism spectrum, so often after the fact, that is what we are left wondering. Pinnacle example I have of this happened to a 18-year-old person with Asperger's in St. Louis back in 2013, and I learned this from a police officer in St. Louis, of which I do lots of law enforcement trainings. And this instance could have turned much worse than what it was. It still was traumatic for the family involved, but this 18-year-old got pulled over. Thankfully, this 18-year-old, he studied for his driving exam very much like he did for his SAT. So he knew the driving handbook better than anybody in the state, so he knew what lights and sirens behind him meant. Unfortunately, that is the only thing he understood of a traffic stop. So when the officer came and tapped on the window, well, nonverbal social cues. Things that aren't concretely stated can go 26.5 miles over our head. Yes, most people realize when an officer taps on your window, that means you're all down 5 minutes ago. For a person on the spectrum, that may just mean somebody's tapping on glass for some unbeknownst reason. So the officer tapped, the person on the spectrum looked at the officer, waited for directions, none came, and looked through the windshield. Oh, that made the officer none too happy, and rightfully so. The officer pounds on the glass harder. This annoys the person on the spectrum, who now looks at the officer and goes, "What?" and looks through the windshield again. Oh, now the officer, absolutely irate, pounds the glass and says, "Sir, roll in your window, now." The person did so, and he very calmly asked the officer, "Oh, why didn't you say so in the first place?" Story goes downhill from there. The officer then asked the unfortunate worded question of, "Sir, can I see your license?" The person on the spectrum thought about it for a moment and said, "No." Ooh. Now the officer, most stern matter of fact, business, said, "Sir, can I see your license now?" Person on the spectrum thought longer and harder about it, trying to figure out what type of trick question this was, and he laughed when he said, "No, you still can't see my license." Well, he was immediately arrested for disobeying the orders of an officer and obstruction of a peace officer's duty, taken to the station. Thank goodness the officers over there had autism training. They were able to read between the lines. They realized this person wasn't intentionally trying to be obstinate, defiant, non-compliant, or any of those other really cool long words. Bottom line, he wasn't out to make the officer's life miserable intentionally. So no charges were filed, but per protocol, the mom still had to come to the station to pick him up. She was in tears. He had missed valedictorian by just a fraction of a point, so picking her son up at a police station wasn't something she ever thought she'd have to do. She's in tears. She gets her son, and she said, "Son, why didn't you help the officer?" The 18-year-old was just as confused then as he was at the beginning of this whole ordeal, and he said, "But Mom, I was trying to help the officer. He kept asking if he could see my license. How could he? It was in my wallet." For those on the autism spectrum, you may be dealing with an absolute literal interpretation of your questions. Think about it. Can I see your license? Take that literally. There are only two answers to that, yes or no. There is nothing in that sentence that implies that the wallet needs to come out, it needs to be opened up, license needs to be taken out, easier said than done, and handed to the officer. 5-step process only implied. And for us on the autism spectrum, we may not be able to fill in those blanks. We may not understand what you're expecting of us unless it is clearly stated. So a lot of those question commands will go over our head, and I know with elementary school teachers, a lot of the friction between a person on the spectrum and the faculty lies within that story right there, where something 99% of the people are going to understand, but for the person on the spectrum, there's just going to be no comprehension of what you're wanting out of them. What I'm getting at, the whole basis of this is that we are experts at saying the wrong thing at the wrong time and having no idea. The way I describe that is through chess. In chess, it's very important to know where your opponent has moved. So when I have a smaller screen, this works a lot better, but just imagine that you're playing as black and you can't see any of white's pieces. You still have to play the game, but you're not going to know if you just made a good move or a bad move. You're going to have no idea. That, for us on the autism spectrum, is what life is like. We're not going to know if we made a good move or a bad move, a move that's going to win us a game or not. The second chapter of my book was about the first true relationship I had, and she too got bad information when I got diagnosed, so she started backing away from me slowly. I had to figure out if she still liked me. Most people could probably call and meet up and say, hey, are we still good? Everything okay? Myself, oh no, I couldn't do that. That involved talking about emotions. So I had to get creative, I had to get crafty, and I came up with this great idea. In my mind, this was a win-win-win-win situation. Nothing bad could come from this. So to see if she still liked me, I decided I had to break up with her, and I did so on Christmas, and I did so via text message. And that was back on the phones where you had to press a button 3 or 4 times to get the right letter, so that was some dedication on a text message. But I wasn't intending on breaking up with her. I just wanted to know if she still liked me. And the trap I fell into that night, and this is the second most important statement about autism, and that is that we can operate under the system of being logical in an emotional world. We may not understand any of the emotional ramifications of our proverbial chess moves because we are only looking at it from a logical standpoint. I couldn't see that if she liked me before the text, maybe she won it after. That thought never crossed my mind. End result, I've only talked to her twice since Christmas 2003. Last time was actually the day I hit a horse in 2008 with my car. Side note, do not hit a horse with your car. I'm lucky to still be here, but so I haven't talked to her in 12 years, but it came from a really innocent place, me sending that text, having no idea the ramifications of it. At the end of the day, I am okay that that nuclear meltdown of a breakup did happen, because if it weren't for that, I don't know if I would be a writer and I wouldn't be a presenter. So when my book got published, the dedication was a no-brainer. It went to her. So not the happiest of endings, definitely not the saddest of endings. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if not for absolutely misplaying the social chess game. Well, my book got published, self-published in October 2008, and then in July of 2009, I got asked to go through providers services in St. Louis. They were rebranding their parent training course, and they wanted to use some of my concepts I put in my book into their curriculum. So they asked me to go through their training as a consultant. Well, I said, sure, sign me up, because one, I hadn't had a job in 5 years, so that sounded great. Job title consultant always sounds amazing. But two, well, job title consultant. So I was like, yeah, sign me up. Well, not the best reason to go into something, but as the first week went on, I finally got the accurate information about autism. I still, in my heart, believe that website that I read the night I got diagnosed that told me, there's no hope, give up. Well, then in the second week, I saw a 5-year-old girl say her first words. She had been nonverbal up to that point, and this training course, the person asked their first words, or said their first words, which completely went against what I believed, and all of a sudden this concept popped into my head. For this concept, imagine the minds on the autism spectrum as being what cement. And let's say we want a patio. We're gonna have to work with it. We're gonna have to work with it quickly to go from this to that. Now, while we're working with it, let's say it's let's say it's a St. Louis summer day. Come to St. Louis in July. It'll be about 105 with about 250% humidity. Okay, those numbers might be slightly exaggerated. Not by that much, though. It's way, way, way too hot. You go outside and you can't see. So, bottom half of that patio, we finish. That top half, we get overheated. We leave it like this, and we figure we'll come back in October when it will be upper 60s, maybe lower 70s. Well, when we come back from July to October, that patio isn't exactly going to be moldable or shapeable. It's going to be set in stone. It's going to be a haphazard pile of that. So too, the minds on the autism spectrum. All the data, all the research out there shows the earlier we work with anyone, the faster the rate of growth. Now, this doesn't mean there's ever a point in time where the situation is hopeless. Sometimes, yeah, we may need to resort to sledgehammers. Yeah, sometimes we may need to resort to jackhammers to break up what's been laid. But there's always that ability to find wet cement. The Hoover Dam, according to my 4th grade teacher, which I haven't fact-checked this because I need this fact to stay alive for this concept, but 4th grade teacher said the Hoover Dam will be drying for several thousand years because that's how long it will take for it to dry all the way through. That too, the way the minds on the autism spectrum are. There's always that ability to find wet cement, and besides that, every day is earlier than tomorrow, so early intervention is an everyday thing. Every day is earlier than tomorrow, and every day is learning behavior, and every day unwanted behavior can pop up and go unchecked. or get reinforced. Let's say that happens. New sidewalk out front. While it was drying overnight, somebody came and scribbled so-and-so loves so-and-so in a nice, cute little heart. Might be kind of cute, might be a miniature work of art, but in a professional learning environment, probably not what the administration wants. So if they saw it early this morning, they could have simply gone out and smooth it over. See, a week from Thursday, it's going to be a whole lot more work to get that same gain. So with anything autism related, sooner truly equals better because, well, you got to work with it while it is wet. I really need to change the name of this from things I hear at book signings to things I've heard on the road because it really hasn't changed in the past 10 years. At my very first book signing in St. Louis, some parents came up and they talked to me and they were trying to get a diagnosis through their school, and their school counselor was having none of it, which I'm not a doctor. I can't give a diagnosis, but their kid was there. This was the most quintessential case of Asperger's I have ever come across, but the school counselor didn't think so. According to the parents, the school counselor had said, yeah, you think your child has Asperger's? Really? No. There's no way. Because one, he gets good grades, and two, he can talk. So even if he has it, which he doesn't, even if he hasn't, don't worry about it. Every child outgrows it by the age of 16. I heard that story. I wasn't hearing their trouble. I was hearing, oh my goodness, somebody's going to buy my book? No way. Not the most selfless I've ever had in my life. I had 3 more book signings in St. Louis, 1 in Indiana, and everywhere I went, it was the same type of story. Now, I'm not picking on any one profession because sometimes it was a pediatrician or a neurologist or it was somebody each time. I like to think we have 99.9% grade. Everybody's out there in the professional world. It only takes that 0.1% to throw a wrench into the whole process. Every time I heard a wrench story, the only thing I was thinking was, oh my goodness, another book. Yeah. Then I went through the parent training program, and a few weeks after that, it still really hadn't sunk in yet on what all this meant and what my book meant. I got 2 tickets to go to the Autism Speaks NASCAR race in Dover, Delaware. I went and I took my aunt, because she lived in Washington, D.C. at the time, but you're not in Kansas anymore, doormat aunt, which taking her to that race was the biggest mistake of my life. You think breaking up on Christmas via text message would take that claim? No. Taking her to that race. Her favorite sport is tennis. Her favorite event, Wimbledon, due to the classiness and highness of it. Wimbledon, NASCAR race in Dover, Delaware. Not quite the same. When they said, gentlemen, start your engines, she was tugging on me going, Aaron, does that mean it's over? Can we go now? I so badly wanted to say, who's not in Kansas anymore? I didn't though, because as bad of a time as my aunt was having, so was I. There I was up in the grandstand. What was I ever going to do with my life? Oh, I was angry. I was bitter. Oh, I was so bitter. You should have been seeing me out there every Sunday competing for wins, competing for championships, having more endorsements than I know what to do with. Yet there I was up in the grandstand. What was I ever going to do with my life? Oh, anger. Well, that race started, the race progressed, and my goodness, that race was boring. It was horrible. It was, That gave me time to think, though. I finally started hearing what those parents had been telling me. And as Jimmy Johnson won yet another race that year, it finally hit me. Wait a minute. What good did Jimmy Johnson do by winning that race? Who did he help? Next day, I drove up to Manhattan to meet the doctor that wrote the endorsement in my book, and she asked me a life-changing question. She said, Aaron, now that you have a book out, do you still want to race? And I answered in a non-literal fashion. I said, yeah, I still want to race, but it is a new race now. The race is to spread as much awareness and understanding as possible because there is so much hope out there, only if people are made aware of it. And besides that, it should almost be criminal for parents of a 3-year-old to be told, don't worry about it, they'll outgrow it. Because if that age of 16 comes around, and it will, that's 13 years of concrete that didn't have to happen. So, yeah, I'm in a new race now, and the race is to beat the concrete. And as I answered that, I realized, growing up, my slogan was, I'm going to be a race car driver. That's plan A. There is no plan B. I all of a sudden realized that this plan B that I said would never happen jumped up, hit me upside the face. This is what I've been doing ever since. Still can't believe it. What you're seeing, though, this didn't happen overnight. So many factors got me here. So many of my teachers, I know I started by saying school was not my thing, but some of the things my teachers did, planting seeds to get me to where I am now. I wanted to find my second and fourth grade teacher simply to say thank you. Two things. One, so often with autism in life, we want to fix everything now. How can we make everything better right now? With autism, you got to look at it like planting seeds. You got to give it time to grow. And my second and fourth grade teachers planted the most awesome of seeds that led me to be a public speaker. And another thing, you can go above and beyond the call of duty for us, and our ability to say thank you may not be there. There are misguided experts out there that say that we have no emotions and no empathy and simply don't care. That couldn't be further from the truth. We have all. It's just that part of our brain where we experience it to that part that we express it can take a while, if not an eternity. But I wanted to find my second and fourth grade teachers simply to say thank you. My second grade teacher was older at the time. I doubt she's still alive. My fourth grade teacher was getting remarried, which we always got to hear about how bad her ex-husband was, especially in spelling tests. If she could use a spelling word in a way to defame her ex-husband, she would. Might not have been the most socially appropriate thing for us fourth graders, but she never crossed the line. But with the name change, there's no finding her. So the seeds they planted, they never saw the harvest that happened. So for people that do go above and beyond the call of duty for a person on the spectrum, it's really sad that you may never get to see just what glorious things came from your work, and that now absolutely saddens me because I'd give anything for just to say thank you one time to those two individuals. Well, I have a big online presence. You can get to everything I do via aaronlikens.com. My book website is findingkansas.com, which I did have a blog. Well, I guess it's still up, but I blogged almost every day from March 3rd, 2010 to about February 2017, so about 1,500 blog posts. When you write that much in a 7-year time span, you just start repeating yourself. So I've been on a sabbatical from my blog, but all the posts are up there, so knock yourself out. 1,500 posts, plenty of material. I am on Twitter. I think that's my handle. If you tweet me, I might tweet you back. I don't know if that makes me a Twitter or I don't know much about Twitter. My primary use of social media is Facebook, of which they change it every other week. So if you can find me, great. It's I have no idea how to search for pages anymore, but facebook.com/autismambassador is like a direct link, which good luck trying to remember that or spell that, but that's my Facebook location. Any questions, anything I covered or didn't cover? I do like questions. Questions are my favorite part of a presentation. So any questions on anything I covered or didn't cover? Going once, going twice. Well, if you have any, I will gladly take them after. Thanks for taking time out of your day to come watch me speak. It means so much to me. So thank you.